With Primitive War Dispatches 3 being currently in the works, along with this being a long-time-awaited request from a friend of the channel, I present this. Hello there, people on the interwebs. This is your 25th favorite dinosaur, and in this video I will not only be covering the series of novels written by Ethan Pettis, but due to request I will also be going over the film adaptation directed by Luke Spark. Thank D. Dan, everyone. Show him some love by subscribing to his channel. Link will be in the description. Now, in discussing the scaling for the novel dinosaurs, we'll be taking feats from the mainline Primitive War novels, the subsequent Dispatches series, as well as the official bestiary. Starting off, a baseline for the versus attack potency ends should easily be within the street-to-wall ranges for smaller dinosaurs, with even predators such as Deinonychus having the ability to knock off a man's jaw with a single swipe. Other feats would include raptors enduring bites from prehistoric crocs, along with them just generally tanking gunfire. This, alongside more outlandish feats, make this line of scaling quite consistent. However, this is far from where the verse would cap off in terms of scaling, as shown with the medium-sized theropods who are not only able to effortlessly dispatch smaller predators, but are even shown to shake the ground to a noticeable degree. Both of these feats would already grant them Wall Plus to small building level attack potency. This line of scaling is made even more consistent since they're shown to contend with Asian elephants alongside dinosaurs, which could also scale into these ranges. However, the versus scaling only gets higher as we move on to the feats of the apex predators. As a baseline, they should blatantly upscale everything we've covered before just off of their sheer size. This by itself already grants them building to large building level scaling. Though like their smaller cousins, they're also able to shake the ground, however, to a much more violent extent. With characters directly comparing the event to an earthquake, this would actually place their scaling into the building to even city block level ranges, higher with them potentially shaking the entirety of Vulture Valley. Now, normally I would discuss the higher ends towards the end of the video, but since I want to keep the movie scaling separate, I might as well cover them now. As I just mentioned, if you wish to scale the Rex pair to the radiated waves of these phenomenon, they would be within those building to city block levels of power. However, since they are the direct cause of these events, you could attempt to scale them to the total seismic energy, which would actually bump up their scaling quite drastically into those town to even large town ranges. Moving on to the versus speed ends, they should at the very least fall within those superhuman ranges, with the Utah Raptors being specifically stated to travel dozens of meters in seconds, along with Caprosuchus being compared to lions in terms of speed. However, subsonic could also be argued through certain feats, such as the Deinonychus being able to drag a person miles in what seemed minutes, granting them superhuman plus speed. Along with this, they're also able to potentially react to gunfire from Vulture Squad. Even the large theropods are implied to be able to keep up with military vehicles. Quick note, even human characters in the series are capable of superhuman to subsonic speed feats, so more consistency there. Now, with the two most anticipated parts out of the way, we can now go over the versus physical strength showings. At a minimum, the dinos showcase Class 1 to Class 10 physicals. However, this level can be reached by even the small carnivores, with medium-sized dinosaurs possessing Class 50 showings. However, off their sheer size, the large theropods could casually reach Class K levels of strength. Now, before we move on to the movie's line of scaling, I feel like I should go over some more contentious feats as well as potential anti-feats for the series. The first of these being Zipitotech enduring a napalm blast. While you could attempt to downscale the feat since he wasn't at the direct epicenter, it should be noted that the blast engulfed the entire clearing, which Zipitotech was still inside of, in a fraction of a second, meaning he still would have endured a large brunt of the blast. Along with that, most of the damage he took came from the subsequent napalm jelly left on his flank rather than the energy of the blast itself. Regardless, the calculation only accounts for Zipitotech enduring the yield of a single napalm blast, whereas in the scene it stated that a payload was used in the clearing, which at the time could mean up to 4 bombs at once. So scaling the Alpha Raptor to the yield of 1 seems like a fair assumption. Other anti-feats would include the dinosaurs taking damage from Vietnam War weaponry. However, this can be explained for a couple reasons. Firstly would be the context of the attacks, since while never directly stated, it's implied that fire is an effective weapon against these dinosaurs. As later on in the novels, It becomes a key part in the military's efforts to combat the creatures. The second and more obvious reason is that while the verse seems to show great feats of enduring blunt force, their resistance to piercing attacks is quite lower in comparison. Though the last and most surprising reason would be the fact that at least some weapons within the primitive war universe hold higher yields when compared to their real-life counterparts, such as the Law rocket launcher being stated to be able to destroy fully armored tanks in the novel, a feat requiring building levels of energy, which honestly makes moments of Raptors getting blown up by it all that less surprising. Moving on to the scaling for the film. It's not much, at least inverse-wise. Look, I'm sorry I tried looking around but couldn't find any statements or comparisons between the dinosaurs, so for the sake of the video, we'll just go off of what is shown in the film. Starting off with the versus attack potency and durability showings, I'll keep these separate for reasons I'll explain later. They should casually be within those athletic human-to-street level ranges, with smaller predators being able to wrestle military members and larger relatives being able to endure assault rifle fire. However, wall-to-small building can be argued through them being directly compared to elephants, which again get into those ranges in attack potency, this alongside the Rex pair having multiple wall-to-small building level showings before and during their rampage of the Russian compound further support this line of scaling. Quick thank you to Drake K2000 for allowing me to use some of his calcs in this video. Show him some love by subscribing to his channel and checking out his latest video where he also covers scaling presented in Warpath Jurassic Park as well as Jurassic the Hunted. Both will be linked in the description. Now when moving on to their durability, it gets a lot more, shall I say, explosive. For this, we'll take a look at two notable feats performed by both Cyclops as well as the Rex pair. Starting off with the Alpha Raptor, he's shown to endure an explosion which seemingly reaches the edge of the research station. Estimating the distance based on the height of this opening, we get a blast radius of about 45.91 meters. While an impressive size, we don't exactly get to see the actual destruction it causes, meaning we'll have to assume it had a minimum pressure of around 0.15 pounds per square inch. Plugging this value in bars alongside the radius into our explosion formula gives us a final value of 0.00117764666 tons of TNT, which roughly translates to over 5 megajoules of energy, meaning Cyclops would be around the wall ranges in terms of durability, however much deeper than before. But I'm sure this is the moment you've all been waiting for. Starting off similarly to the last calculation, we'll estimate the distance of the explosion based on this truck right here, which most closely resembles a ZIL-157, which had a length of around 6.922 meters. Estimating the distance between the truck cabin and the camera, we can see the explosion covered a minimum distance of 8.6797 meters. But considering the fact that the blast covered this distance in roughly half a second, this would give the blast a minimum velocity of about 16.27 meters per second. This paired with the fact that the blast ran for about 4.66 seconds, gives us a final blast radius of 75.947 meters. Along with this, the explosion itself is shown rupturing and tearing apart the steel of armored vehicles, which would actually bump up the pressure of the explosion to about 5 to 10 pounds per square inch. Taking these factors into account means that the Rex pair would be enduring roughly 4.03 and 12.47 tons of TNT respectively, which would actually bump up their durability to within the large building to even city block level range. Now I should point out that this would in no way scale to their physical strikes, since they are never shown to harm an opponent capable of harming them. Physical AP scales to physical durability, not the other way around. Moving on to the versus speed ends. They mainly cap at the athletic human to peak human levels of speed, with the Rexes being able to absolutely hawk down military personnel, as well as other creatures being able to completely outpace them. However, you could argue that the pterosaurs possess subsonic travel speed via them keeping pace with helicopters. Ending this all off with the versus physical strength, smaller dinosaurs are able to wrestle with military personnel, so they would get athletic human as a baseline. However, larger predators are capable of producing a couple of tons of force with their jumps, placing them in the Class 5 ranges of strength. Even more so, the Rexes showcase feats such as knocking down decently sized trees, as well as pulling down a helicopter, both of which would be in the Class 10 range. Now with all our scaling covered, let's get a quick recap of what we've covered today. Starting off with the scaling for the novel, at bare minimum, smaller predators and herbivores should be within those street-to-wall ranges, with more medium-sized predators reaching the wall to small building range. Larger predators and those who scale to them should casually be within that small building to building tier of power. And finally, the absolute apexes of the verse should casually reach those large building to even city block level ranges. However, with a generous high ball, the verse could even reach town to large town in attack potency. As for speed, they consistently are within those superhuman to subsonic ranges. For the film adaptation, smaller predators should at least be within those athletic human to wall ranges. However, small building can be argued for larger predators, with their durability scaling far above this. As for speed, it should be within those athletic human to peak human levels. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Now, if you disagree with anything I've said, or if there's anything I may have missed, please be sure to leave a comment as it helps me make better quality content for you guys. Now with that, remember to drink water, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.